Unit 8, Listening Part 3.
In today's On Message, I'm joined by Harry Cameron, the veteran journalist who has witnessed many changes in his profession over the last nearly 60 years as a reporter. Harry, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Harry, I'd like to start, if I may, by asking you what being a journalist was like when you started your first job as a junior reporter on the Daily Journal.
My main memory of those far-off days is the sense of pride I felt at writing for a respected national newspaper. It was a real honour. What you have to remember is that in those days, people got most of their information about what was going on in the world from their daily newspapers, and almost everyone read a paper every day. Television was in its infancy, something only the rich could afford. The radio broadcast regular news bulletins, but newspapers gave people the pictures to go with the stories. Journalists like me travelled the world and filed reports which kept people up to date with everything important that was going on. I remember once in the early 1950s reporting from a war zone in East Asia. I wrote my report sitting on the bed in my hotel bedroom. I could hear gunfire and see plumes of smoke. I wrote my story, then phoned it through to my editor for publication a day or two later. I was telling people about something thousands of miles from home, and more importantly, something they didn't already know.
But people still read newspapers today, don't they?
Yes, of course, but their function has changed. If you want to know what's going on in the world at any particular time, you don't read a newspaper, do you? You turn on the telly, and you'll probably have an extensive choice of news programmes to watch. Some of them, like CNN or News 24, rolling news programmes which are broadcast 24 hours a day. And then, whatever channel you're watching, there'll be regular news updates. And on top of all that, there's the internet.
So what can newspapers provide if not current news?
Well, I suppose different newspapers provide different things, don't they? The more upmarket ones give us background to the news stories and an in-depth analysis of the issues involved. I think they do this very well. At the more popular end of the market, papers these days focus more and more on stories involving celebrities from the world of sport, TV, cinema, etc. And sport itself, of course. There's sport everywhere, always accompanied by photographs, action shots. People lap all this up. And I suppose it is news of a kind, but to my mind it's a somewhat distorted definition of news.
And what about citizen journalism? Is this a term you're familiar with?
Yes, it is, and it's something I have some sympathy with, even though it may put some of my own colleagues out of work in the long run.
So how would you explain its sudden appearance as a source of information?
It's quite simple. The fact is that the internet has given everyone access to a wealth of information and to a worldwide audience. So a citizen journalist in a war zone, like me 50 years ago, doesn't have to write a story and send it to an editor who can decide whether or not to run the story in their newspaper. They can simply add information to a news website like Now Public or write their own blog. Bloggers are the new journalists. And, of course, they can take photos with their mobile phones and send them straight to an internet site or blog.
And how reliable are bloggers and citizen journalists as sources of information?
At least as reliable as the traditional news providers, whose stories are usually revised and cut by editors who may be under political pressure from a newspaper owner or even their government. And, of course, some news websites allow other members of the public to add to, update, or correct stories that are already there. I'd say it's a very democratic editorial process.
So this is not something you think should be controlled in any way?
Absolutely not. Anyway, you couldn't control it, even if you wanted to. The genie's out of the bottle.
And you have no regrets about the effect of this form of journalism on the profession you were so proud to be part of when you first became a reporter?
I suppose I'm a little sad. But the important thing is that people have reliable sources of up-to-date information. Of course, there will always be a role in newspapers and elsewhere for intelligent comment and analysis of the news. And if I were starting out again now, that's the kind of journalism I'd get into.
And you do it extremely well, I have no doubt.
Oh.
Harry Cameron, thanks for being my guest on today's On Message.
It's been my pleasure.